I'd like to entertain a motion that we accept the minutes of the previously held meeting. Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Nay. The ayes have it. We have, I believe, 2 items that are up for public hearing today. The procedure is that we'll ask those who are in favor of these conditional use requests to step to the microphone right up there and provide for the committee your name and address. You'll be allowed some time to speak if you're in favor or against the proposal in reference to the 2 conditional use requests that are before us. We'll then repeat that procedure this evening after that public hearings. What we will then do is we will then make a recommendation. This committee here will make a recommendation to council tonight in terms of either passing or turning down or tabling the proposed conditional use request. So those are the procedures. However, though, at this time, we'd like to ask a representative from our law department to swear in those who wish to testify to the committee in reference to the conditional use requests that are coming before us.
If you'll be speaking on the conditional use request, if you could stand and please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, nothing but the truth? Say, I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. York. Very good. The first item that's up for conditional use is authorizing conditional use to place the CO2 tanks at 1031 Forbes Avenue. Mr. Antonucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Gem and Sons is proposing to extend their commercial business by locating a CO2 tank upon residentially zoned property, which requires a conditional use approval. Proposed white CO2 storage tank would measure 53 feet in length by 9 feet in width, would be sited behind their existing building, addressed at 825 South Arlington. The existing dwelling and garage on Forbes Avenue lot would be demolished. A new 6 feet east to the north. The remainder of the Forbes Avenue lot would be fenced, and the only access to the lot would be from the CO2 tank is needed at this location to manufacture dry ice. Due to the location of loading docks on the north elevation, the layout of the building, placing the CO tanks on the east side of the building is the most feasible alternative. Gem & Sons Limited has been doing business in Akron for over 120 years. The proposed CO2 tanks would be screened from view, and its contents are not hazardous. Allowing Gem & Sons to slightly expand into the adjacent residential neighborhood would not be detrimental to the area, and both Planning Commission planning staff recommend approval subject to conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Antonucci. This time we'll open it up for discussion. If there's anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use requests on South Arlington, please feel free to come forward and provide for us your name and address.
Sure. Harry Geem, 825 South Arlington Street, Akron, Ohio, 44306. Said I'm Generation 5. I'm just, anybody got any questions about it? I could answer whatever you need to know.
Very good. That's a very good report. Short and sweet. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of this conditional use request on Arlington Street? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone? Okay, hearing none. We'll now open it up to questions from the committee members in reference to this conditional use request. Quick question for you. Was the recommendation of the planning department and the commission favorable on this?
Yes.
Okay. Is there, and I see here that there's going to be a fence plan that's going to be submitted?
That's correct. The fence would be all around the perimeter of that property, and it would be solid against the residential property adjacent to that.
Good. Questions or comments from anyone? Anyone at all? Mr. Saworski.
Are there certain safety training requirements, or does this fall under federal regulation? Or?
Well, what happened is he will need building permits for this. He will need building permits.
Building permits?
They are actually over across the street. they have this going on now. CO2 tanks are not hazardous, they're not considered hazardous.
Who has it going on now?
The Gem and Sons.
The same company?
The same company right
Okay.
across the street. So
Okay.
they would, instead of having to move the tanks back and forth, they'll actually have it at this location as well. So it'll help them with their dry ice manufacture.
Okay.
Also, there is a condition that this is subject to the approval of the fire department, just so.
Okay, so the fire department make sure that everything's being handled safely and
That's
stored?
correct. That's correct.
Okay, and they have a good track record from,
120 years in Akron, yep.
they've been here in 20 years?
Yep.
Okay, but there's not been safety violations or other accidents to
No,
your knowledge?
none that I'm aware of,
Okay, so accident-free?
as far as I know, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Mrs. Mobian?
You said they're going to be moving the tanks from one?
Well, they're going to be locating new tanks at this location. They have the tanks at 802 South Arlington now.
Across the street?
Right, across the street. So, but they want them at this location to make their,
Oh, just
you know,
going to move into
manufacturing.
one location as
That's right.
opposed to two?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll now move on to the second item that's up for public hearing, and that's authorizing a conditional use to construct an oversized accessory structure at 2095 Forest Edge Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Lori Gurick is requesting permission to construct a 58 feet by 30-foot garage. The structure will also include a lower level maintenance garage and a second floor bonus room for a total of 3,580 square feet on all levels. The property currently contains a single-family dwelling and a barn. The proposed structure is to be centrally located on this large 15-acre property. The structure will be constructed with decorative split-face block and vertical siding on the first floor elevation. The property is located in an area with a very low density of housing that can be characterized as rural in nature. The garage would not be out of character for this neighborhood. The garage would be used for the residential purpose of storing personal vehicles, equipment, and maintenance vehicles necessary for the day-to-day operations of maintaining their land and horse farm. And both Planning Commission and Planning staff recommend approval subject to conditions.
Thanks. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of this conditional use request? On Forest Edge?
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Serraldo. I'm the architect, and I live at 786 Meredith Lane, Cogga Falls, 44223, which actually is Ward 1, Akron. I'm an architect, and I'm also the agent for the owner, Laura Gaguric, for this project. So if you have any questions at this time, I can answer them.
Thank you, sir. Thanks. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of this conditional use request at Forest Edge? Anyone else in favor? Anyone against this proposal at Forest Edge? Anyone against? Very good. Hearing none. Is there any questions or comments? Mr. Swirsky.
Okay, the memorandum from the planning staffs said that the structure is to be centrally located on the property. Is that?
I couldn't hear you.
That the structure is going to be centrally located?
I don't know about centrally, but it is, you know, within they own several lots that encompasses the 15 acres. So to say that, I guess that would be okay.
Okay, I guess, well, Len, maybe if I ask a question about how close are the nearest neighbors?
More than, I don't know if you got one of these
I
copies.
do. Yeah, I'm trying to, doesn't spell out if there's houses there or
Well,
there's
if you
some
see on
houses
your
nearby.
drawing here,
If you look at the-
here's the houses here. So here's the proposal. So I don't know if it's 400 or 500 feet or how far away it is. I didn't measure.
Did you guys measure?
Yeah, it's
There's a
about
key.
200 feet from the nearest property line to the
There's a
east.
scale on from the
You
property
can-
line.
If you look at the scale on the map, you'll see it's about 200 feet from the
Okay.
nearest property line.
Then go over, explain it a little bit. So it's about 200 feet from the property line?
That's correct.
Where's the nearest housing structure, where people live?
About
How far is
300
that?
250 to 300 feet away.
And how many houses are within that distance?
I can show you a map here if you want to take a look at
I have this map, but it's, could you just,
I'd say there's two that are
Two?
that close.
okay. And have the neighbors been notified of the change?
it. Neighbors were notified, yes,
How were they notified?
by mail.
Okay, have you had any conversations with your neighbors?
No.
No.
I tried calling you.
You tried calling me?
Yeah.
Okay, that's in, okay.
Okay.
I'll talk to you about that. Okay, yeah.
Any further questions or comments?
Why do they need a bigger one? They already have a horse farm and equipment.
Well, the barn itself is in a location where it's not very well protected secure-wise. Also, this is not just for a barn, it's also for their equipment and for additional cars. So it's not essentially just for the horse farm. It's one of the other uses that it will be.
For private use?
Yeah, all for private use.
Okay, and then in the commission, in the report that you guys wrote, you talk about new landscaping to further minimize the impact on neighboring properties. Does someone want to explain what that is?
Yeah, that was on his original plans to show some landscaping there.
That would be landscaping in front of the accessory building so that it's within the hill and the trees would kind of screen the doors so you wouldn't see the doors. But that's a personal preference because this building is closer to their house than it is closer to the barn.
Yeah. So you're going to add some additional trees, is what you're saying? Or
Oh, there'd be some
additional-
pine trees for like screening.
Okay.
Yeah.
About how many trees are you going to put in?
Maybe 3 to 4. And it's just for the,
3 to 4.
if you look at the plan, there's like a little curved walkway around it, so it'll be in between the drive and that curved walkway.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Good, hearing none. We'll invite you both back this evening. We'll have additional public hearings, additional public hearings at 7 o'clock, and again, we'll make a recommendation after those public hearings this evening. You're welcome back. Thanks for coming. I'm going to recommend time on the balance, and then we can go ahead and go into the new list of legislation. Okay. Item number 2, declaring certain improvements to real property located on the White Pond Frank Boulevard urban renewal area to be a public purpose and exempt from real property taxation, providing for the collection of service payments in lieu of taxes and the deposit of those service payments in the appropriate fund, providing for the payment of a portion of said service payments to the Akron Public School District. Someone here? Yes, sir, Mr. Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is for a tax increment finance ordinance for the improvements that we've done at the White Pond Parkway, and also specifically for the parcel where the Sickich building has now been constructed. What we were able to do with this tax increment financing is be able to finance some of the new roadway that we built back into the parkway now. So now we have to go to the state and submit the TIF application, and that's what this ordinance does.
Very good. How far back are we going with this, with the roadway in terms of
The portion that we constructed went about 2/3 back. We can still go back about another third until we hit the old gravel yard, which eventually we probably will, depending on how the other parcels end
Gotcha.
up being
Did
sold.
this take care of utilities as well?
Correct.
Okay,
We did put
good.
utilities
So
under the
are about
road.
2/3 of the way back as well?
Yes.
Good, that's good. How many jobs at Skitch, or how you pronounce that?
Sickich?
Sickich.
Yeah, it's an accounting firm. It's roughly 65 to 70 jobs, and obviously they're all accountants, so it's a very Very nice project.
Good. Very good. Is there any other questions or comments? Is there a rush on this thing, Mr. Beckert?
Consent would be fine.
Consent's okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Is there a recommendation for the consent agenda? All those in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. 3, this is authorizing the city to grant an easement interest in city property to the Cleveland Clinic Akron General Medical Center. Hospital.
So this is, as it says, an easement for Cleveland Clinic to put in IT infrastructure under Akron General Avenue. Representatives from the clinic are actually planning on coming next week to committee to discuss this, but just wanted to have this for the committee this week, so if the committee would be willing to take time, and if there are any questions in the meantime before next week, happy to help answer those.
Perfect. Let me look here. There is a map I see. This is under Broadway, the easement, is that it?
The easement is under Akron General Avenue in 2 places, going across the street down by Akron General Cleveland Clinic.
Gotcha. Okay. Very good. So they'll be here next week?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any questions for the short run? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask, is there a motion to refer this item? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. 4, declaring the necessity and intent of the city of Akron to appropriate fees, simple interest in real property owned by Noah Zalewski, located at 408 Wellington Avenue for the purposes of constructing, maintaining, repairing, enlarging, and reconstructing a sewer or sewers and water lines for drainage, sewerage, and water lines purposes for Hazel Street storage basin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. This would be our first step in the appropriation. This is for the upcoming CSO 1011 project.
Okay. Any questions or comments on this? Yes, Mr. Neal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just in regards to Wellington Street, because that's come up to us a lot, and I know Mr. Kilby, I believe Mr. Fusco is working with the one gentleman who had some property down there with the ice cream trucks. At least he said you were working with them.
Yes.
Okay. And I know he was surprised because he had some property that he was working on down there. Just a quick question. Everybody that's down in that area, have we secured all the land and notified her? Because I know with the one gentleman, he was under the understanding he had the opportunity to, that's where he was planning to move his operation.
Yes,
and he found out that the land was actually...
I have spoke with him, and we are trying to work towards a solution.
Okay. Okay, but I know through speaking with him directly and Mr. Kilby that the city is doing that, very appreciative. I just want to make sure, because Wellington has come before us several times.
Yeah.
We're good with everybody else down in that area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
We still have a few to wrap up down there. We have some, basically some estate issues, some bankruptcy issues. We're working with Summit County Land Bank on some delinquent taxes, but everyone has been notified, and I've talked with them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Cool. Any further questions? Consent agenda okay?
That'd be fine.
Very good. Is there a recommendation for consent? Is there a second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
5 is declaring improvements to certain real property located at Eastgate 2 urban redevelopment area to a public purpose and exempt from real property taxation, declaring that construction and rehabilitation of certain real property in a public purpose, providing for the collection of service payments in lieu of taxes and the deposit of those service payments in the Urban Redevelopment Tax Increment Equivalent Fund, providing for the payment of a portion of said service payments to the Akron Public School District.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, this is another tax increment finance piece of legislation. As you recall, when the Goodyear legislation was brought to you, we indicated that every TIF application would be brought back to council in order for council to approve before we went to the state. This TIF application is actually for Goodyear Hall. Now that Goodyear Hall is up and running with apartments, we are now going to go to the state for the TIF application. And as you know, we just did the street improvement, which is about a year old now, on East Market Street, which will help us to pick up some of the cost for that project.
Gotcha. Yeah, I see here all the improvements are listed and attached.
Yep.
I do believe, correct?
Yes.
Is there any questions here? Mr. Neal.
Not so much a question, but just a comment. And I know we've had some discussion about any time we give tax incentive financing, making sure that the construction meets our optimum goals, and I know those have been changed. When I say optimum goals, everything with the CSO project for green infrastructure and the other initiatives that we're doing for community building. And not to go back on this, just since we're talking about it, this is fine, but have we upgraded those requirements to meet those goals? I know planning has been very sensitive to those, but where it's actually in our code for tax incentive financing, where they have to meet the more, I'll use the term stringent requirements.
And Mr. Neal, you're talking about the hiring for contractors that do the work?
No, sir, no, that's different. This is in the sense of making sure, like, we've talked about permeable streets, permeable asphalt, the CSO requirement end of it. I know in the past, we haven't really had that as it's been under our old code.
So for mitigating stormwater and things of runoff.
Exactly.
I don't have the answer to that right now. It's definitely something that we could talk to our public service department and find out more about.
I would just think, and I defer to other members on the committee, if we're going to give tax incentive financing for future projects, that we use it so that we can achieve our other goals by making sure that they meet those higher requirements to help mitigate CSO overflow and just overall improvement. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Councilman Neal, I can comment on White Pond Drive. We did do a bioswale in the White Pond Parkway in the center there. So as well as on the Goodyear improvements, we are using bioswales in the middle there. So we are trying as much as we can to go green in a lot of these street and public improvements that we are paying with the TIF.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Bump outs, I think, have that.
Bump outs,
There.
bike lanes.
Bike lanes.
Yes.
Over on the Goodyear project. I'm trying to remember what else is over there. But it's good. Very good. For the questions or comments? Is consent agenda okay on this item?
Please, that would
Okay.
be fine.
Motion for consent.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you.
6, authorizing the execution of a contract for sale of land for private redevelopment with East Akron Neighborhood Development Corporation, Middlebury Limited Liability Corporation, or their respective assignees, providing for the acquisition, sale, lease, and redevelopment of property in the amended Middlebury Urban Renewal Plan area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. EANDC would transfer 1.8 acres of vacant property at 953 East Market to the city. The city would then transfer the property back to EANDC, Middlebury LLC, to allow the use of tax increment financing. This is for the development of the low-income housing tax credit mixed-use project that was approved through council on November 7th, I believe. This would then further, beyond that, the city would donate the adjacent 7,600 square foot open space known as Hill Park. This is at the northwest corner, East Market and Broad, to ENDC so they can maintain the property to use as open space. And that's, we recommend approval, Planning Commission and Planning staff.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Antonucci. I see a representative from EADC is here. If you could please provide for the committee your name and address.
My name is Grady Appleton. I'm President and CEO of East Akron Neighborhood Development Corporation, located at 550 South Arlington Street in Akron. We'd love to have the city donate this parcel of land to us. It's contiguous to the property that we've purchased for the Middlebury Commons project. As you know, it's a mixed-use project consisting of some 14,000 square feet of commercial space, and we're also going to construct 40 units of senior housing. This land is located in a really great area. It's a public space. We're going to work with community groups in that area to actually determine what we're going to actually put on the site. We want to make it a more functional park and continue it as an amenity for people living in the community as well as folks living in our building.
Very good. Thank you. Is there any questions or comments on this particular item? Very good. Hearing none. Is there a consent agenda okay, or is there a rush on this one? Should we?
Consent should be fine.
Consent is okay.
Motion for consent. This is a group with a great track record.
There's a second. All those in favor of consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Very good. We're adjourned. Thank you.
That's good, thanks.
Could we squeeze another committee in there?
Public service will come to order in 30 seconds.
Reedy, boss. We got Sims, we got Mr. Hope. Mr. Sims, you want to join the committee?
I'm here. You mean samples?
I mean, samples, I'm sorry.
With all members present, with the exception of Councilman Hope.
We're looking for him now.
Can we get approval for the meeting minutes of the last meeting? All in favor? Thank you. We have two pieces today. The first piece of legislation authorizing the mayor and director of public service, the director of finance, and the director of neighborhood assistance to enter into contracts after publicly advertising for bid for the purchase of materials and services needed by various divisions of the departments of the city for a period of time not to exceed 3 years, improving specifications therefore and declaring an emergency. You can go ahead, Mr. Moore.
Okay, thank you. This is our annual appropriation for materials. In meeting with you, I understand there's some problems with the numbers, so what we're going to do is fix those and get back to you next week. We'll leave this with you, and as soon as we get the adjustments, we'll get them to council as well.
So I don't know if any other council member had any questions thus far. It was just some numbers that seemed a little off. I shared with Mr. Moore, and so they're going to make some amendments to the legislation and get it back to us.
Kim just let me know that you have them already, so look them over this week, and then next week we'll ask for passage.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any questions?
Behind you there.
Mr. Neal.
Thank you. If this is the one I'm thinking about, this item number 7?
Yes.
Okay. Just noticing some of the things on the contracts for items that, some things that we've been talking about for a while. Didn't know if we had a chance to look into them a little bit deeper. One is the, it looked like the lawn service contract for neighborhoods. I know we've talked about trying to engage residents more in that process, and I know we've been doing a pretty good job, but don't know exactly where we stand. And the reason why I'm asking is because I still get requests from residents to be a part of the, engaged in the process to take care of some of the lots. So that's the one thing. I see Mr. Valley stepped up, so.
The light's not on. Do you hear me?
Yes.
This is both for public and private. We bid out the privates a couple months ago. We have several bids that came back on that. We're still working on the nonprofit portion of it. We have talked to at least 2 other nonprofits that we're hoping will be new nonprofits that'll help us mow the public, the city-owned vacant lots this year. So we're heading in that direction. I think we've come a long way in the last 3 or 4 years. A couple years, 3 or 4 years ago, we might have had 1. I think last year we had 5 different nonprofits out there helping us mow the vacant city properties. So,
Mr. Valley, there's under mowing services, one is mowing services, and then the other one is mowing and landscaping. The one that you deal with is just the mowing services?
Just the mowing, correct.
Okay. And the mowing and landscaping is more like?
The pocket parks.
Those are more for like our own personal areas, like water supply.
Okay.
Water reclamation and sewer.
So the one I'm looking at is more so the 210 figure. And it's just, and I think it's been stated by Mr. Moore, and I think you know this, Mr. Valley, the more we can engage local residents in that process, there's just a different pride that resonates. There's a different, we get a different level of service because it impacts your neighborhoods more directly. And I'm thinking that, at least I can only speak from our ward, I know I still have some groups that want to get involved if there's an opportunity for that. So that was number 1. The second one was the fire hydrant thing. I know we've had conversations about that. I know, Mr. Moore, you were going to look into the STOW program where And I don't know if that's the painting of the hydrants under that contract, because I saw one that there were like 2 of them. Is that contract up for renewal, or is that in here? Because
It's not in this ordinance.
It's not in this one? Okay. Is that in another one that we will?
It will be. It will be. I think the contract expires this year. We had a 3-year deal. All right.
Okay.
So it will be back before you at some point.
Okay.
I mean, I did look into the stove program, and be perfectly honest, it didn't work that well for them, but we can discuss that and other ideas you have.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, there was one more.
Go ahead.
There was one more.
Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
And this is in relation to, you may not have this information, but as we talk about creating opportunity, and there's a word that we use a lot called equity, and I think it would be good for us to even have a conversation on what that is. As we try to engage more of our residents in the process and to make sure that the diversity is there, reading through the TIF financing that we do, you know, that's one of the requirements in there, that the diversity and whatnot. If we could at some time get an idea of how diverse the contractors are that get these contracts, first, you know, Mr. Willie Smith, God bless him, he stays on top of us. This thing about, you know, Akron residents, how many of these contractors live in our community? Do they employ, so we get an idea of what our contractors look like. Location, ethnicity, diversity, that whole thing, so that we can do our part to make sure that the process is as equitable as possible. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Neal. Any more questions? In light of the updates that's already been made, would be consent agenda be okay?
Yes. Consent will give you the
So
changes.
please take a look at the updated attachment. If you have any questions, let's get those to John before next week. All in favor of consent agenda? Can I get a second? All in favor? Thank you. The next piece of legislation appointing and improving the assessment equalization board members and declaring an emergency.
This is just an ordinance to update our current list and make it reflect what's actually occurring on the Assessment Equalization Board. And as you can see, there are many vacancies that council has the authority to appoint if they so choose.
So do we have any questions? Just a comment, on several occasions, I know that Sarah has sent out requests to members of council about appointing members that represent their wards. If you have not had that opportunity to do that, I'd ask you to really take a look at the list. I'm sure there'd be some young person out there who would be happy to serve or have the opportunity to serve. If you do have challenges locating folks within your ward, please do talk to your at-large members that may be of assistance to you in identifying someone who'd be willing to serve. If you don't mind, I'd like to refer this item. All in favor of referring? Can I get a second? All in favor? My enthusiastic group has said aye. Thank you. That's all we have before us today.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to start yet. Hey, John. the committee here. How you doing? You seen Hope? Oh, there he is. Okay. Whenever you're ready, sir.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call a public safety meeting to order, please. If I can have some order in council chambers, I greatly appreciate it. Like I said, this is public safety. Yep, all members are present. We did have a meeting last week. We had two pieces on that agenda. One, we suspended the rules, and one we put on consent agenda. Can I get approval of those minutes, please? All in favor? Aye. Who seconded that? Yeah, you're not on the committee. Oh, I'm sorry. So let's do that again. Let's do that again. That threw me off. So let's do that again. Let's get a. And all in favor? Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. All right, we have two new pieces in front of us today. First one is ordinance amending and supplementing Title 7 Traffic Code, Chapter 70, General Provisions, Article 4, impounding, Section 70.52, motor vehicle pounds, in order to add 2 towing companies to the city's towing districts and declare an emergency. Now, for a person that's been on the tow review board since 2013, I have a lot to say about this, but I'll save my comments for now. And I know one of the sponsors is on the Public Safety Committee, so I'll see if you have any comments or want to explain.
So I'll give deference to Chair Sample to speak to the legislation, but I know we've had this conversation on a number of occasions, as most recently as last week. The response has been, it's the council's responsibility. You have the authority to change districts if that's what you want to do, to make sure that we're more inclusive, and I think that's the step that we've taken. But I'm sure Chair Moses can speak more clearly to the piece of legislation.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Samples.
And thank you, Councilman Kamer. So yes, this legislation is to add 2 other towing companies to the districts who have done business in the city and done business very well, and they both have come down requesting to be added to the district. I do know that Kenny's Automotive has requested close to 20 years to be added to the district. So really what this legislation is to do is to spread the wealth. They're already doing business in the city. I know Team Towing has a representative here. She's come down on numerous occasions and she's spoken with several people in this regards. And I know that 33% of their tows are AAA, and a lot of the other towing districts really don't like to do AAA, so that would definitely help within that regard to help residents out. And the reason why we brought it in, and this is just a draft so we can have a conversation about how this should look, Kenny's and Team Towing, they're okay with sharing the district. I did talk to Mr. York about this, and it would be done on a 50-50 split, where they would call one, and if there's another call, it will go to the other, so that they're spreading the wealth. The one thing that I do think that that needs to be noted is that most of these districts are owned by the same people. You know, we have, I do believe that District 1 and 2 are both owned by Bowers, and Griggs owns Districts 3 and 5. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's not like it's really going to hurt their business because they own more than one district. They would just be, they would have somebody else there as a caveat when there's an issue, especially now with the winter coming. If you have one person covering the whole district, and if there's an accident, you have to wait for one towing company when you have another towing company just sitting there, especially one who's doing AAA. So I'm hoping that we all take a look at this, definitely, you know, take some time to look it over and see if we keep it this way, or do we expand District 5, which is the smallest of them all, where it's comparable for them both, but seeing that District 5 covers 2 different districts, I just don't see where it would cause too many issues. And again, they both have all the equipment. They've submitted a list of all their equipment. They both have been down here extensively to speak to us about being added to the districts. It's been some time since anyone has been added to the district. They sold to other people, but nothing has ever changed as far as adding people. So I'll let Mr. York speak to what he did with this legislation, and the things that, how this would be handled.
I just wanted to clarify one point that you made about how the police department would make the referrals. The way I wrote the legislation based on our conversation is that the police department would make referrals based on an equal split between the 2 companies in the district. I didn't write it so that they would refer one call and then another call, because I don't know what makes sense for the police department. Maybe it's better for their record keeping and procedure to do it on a daily basis or a weekly basis. So I just wrote it open-ended so the police department could figure it out.
Thanks, Mr. York. Before we move forward with any other questions or comments, what I did as safety chair is I reached out to Captain Shanae to see if she can speak in regards to her experience on the tow review board and obviously daily operations of dispatching these tow companies. I also received 2 letters last week in regards to the 2 tow companies that this will affect. So they did ask for time to speak, so I'm going to grant them time to speak here in a minute. But Captain Shanae, if you don't mind, please coming up and giving your experience in regards to the tow review board and the daily operations that the Akron Police Department does with the tow companies, please.
Okay, one of the concerns that I see right away is it's not whether or not this is a good idea or not, it's the fact that we only received the legislation draft this morning, or what's being presented for legislation this morning. So we've not had very much time to really do research as to how impactful this is going to be for us to come up with a reasonable and equitable solution to share tows in these districts. Our computer-aided dispatch system, which is CAD is what that stands for, is this computer system that currently is programmed with the tow districts as they are currently. That system is in the works for being replaced because of its age and its lack of capabilities. And I spoke with Lieutenant McCosey, who is been very involved with that process. And just given the information that we have right now, he can't guarantee at this point that we could write a program that would be able to implement a sharing process for a tow district like that. So that is a concern of ours, that we don't want to have to be making hash marks on a piece of paper that, you know, goes back and forth between 5 different communication shifts. We want to make sure that this would be fair and that no company is going to suffer because we don't have a program in place that can handle this legislation.
Okay. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate it. I'm sorry you just got it this morning. Obviously, I forwarded it to you, so I appreciate that. Mrs. Sims?
Thank you so much, Officer Shanae. So one of the things we've been told for at least since the beginning of the year, I know, is that this is the authority that the council has to set the districts. So is the issue that you don't have current capacity, or is it the issue we just can't do this?
Like I said, we haven't had the opportunity to get with the people who are able to work in the programming of our CAD to see if it is possible for us to have a program written that can handle this alternating by whatever means, you know, whether it's 1 for 1 or this day through this day is this company, and you know, we just haven't been able to come up with a plan and then determine whether that plan can work.
So you're not saying, is the issue you just haven't had time to look close enough at it, or are we just saying?
The issue is there is a possibility that our CAD is in such a state that it would not allow for such a program, and the new CAD that is in the works to be purchased is approximately, and I would say at least 18 months away.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members on the committee? Rich, did you have a comment, or are you good?
Turn your microphone on, sir. Mr. Cameron, I understand you didn't see this till this morning either?
No, I saw this last week when it came out, but I did not know of any presenter or anyone that was going to come and speak of the legislation, so I reached out to Captain Shanae.
Okay, so the police department hasn't had a chance to review it adequately to really take a position on it, or is that?
That's correct. We were first given a copy of the actual language of the legislation this morning.
Okay. And Mr. Kimmy, you mentioned that there's a towing board. You want to explain that for everybody, just to make sure everybody understands what that is?
I explained that 3 weeks ago, but yeah, sure, I'll explain it again. There's 5 voting members on the tow review board, myself, 1 being public safety chairperson. You have a representative from the mayor's office, representative from Akron Municipal Court, representative from Akron Police Department, and drawing a blank. Service.
Okay. Have they seen this legislation?
I believe so, yeah.
Do they support it, against it? Do we know?
Well, I'll speak to the tow review board. This is just going to complicate things much. Okay. That's like, I can use several examples, but how I look at this is, that's like me and at-large, if I'm okay to use your name, at-large Jeff Fusco. I get a phone call, he gets a phone call. I get a phone call, he gets a phone call. It's going to be hard to keep track. I look at it as a problem. Tow review board, since I've been on in 2013, our problems have been minimal. The tow companies are in good standards, morale. I believe we're moving the city forward. I just think this is going to complicate things more. And I have a lot more to say, but I kind of want to listen to the members of council before I really give my testimony on what I do hands-on with the tow companies. So hopefully that's a good start for you. Mrs. Somerville?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I guess some questions that I would have is in terms of, do we have numbers of actually how many tows are happening in District 4 and 5 where we see that there really is a need to have two tow companies involved, or are we just doing this because these are two companies that have approached us? And then I think we also need to think about, just being fair. I mean, you're going to have some companies that aren't sharing, and how are you going to deal with that issue of it? So I think, potentially there could be some issues the way that it's wrote up.
And Mrs. Somerville, just a comment on your question. Tow Review Board, we have those numbers. Every 3 months we meet. We go over those numbers. I don't have them on the top of my head. We just met last week. I did mention that a couple weeks ago. We did have a meeting last Wednesday. We go over those numbers and any problems or concerns from citizens, et cetera. Before, let me go and see, because I know you've already spoke twice, if that's okay. Yeah, but I know Linda has her hand up. So Linda, do you want to speak?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I'm trying to understand, and it's taken me a little while to understand these districts and the role that they play, and now that I do, I don't understand what the confusion is about or why we can't accommodate the districts as they are. Maybe they need to be redrawn. But aside from being redrawn or even looked at again, if we utilize the layout that we have available already and go back to the way it was before you had two towers take on two each, what is the problem with taking one from each one of those and giving it to new individuals to take advantage of this opportunity? Because that's what we're talking about, allowing 7 towers to have a district each. And I don't know what the complication is about that. Am I speaking about something?
She can speak about that.
The complication comes from making sure that the person who is working at the services position where tows are, officers request tows from, and then the service technician contacts the appropriate tow company. It's making sure that they know which company is supposed to be contacted. So if the districts don't change, then if it's one of the districts that now has 2, which one is the one that gets called?
I mean, the individuals with 2 districts would have to give up 1.
Yes, that's not what the legislation says. It's sharing 2
Okay, so
districts.
If we want to go with separating it the way it used to be, if we can't redesign it in terms of asking them to do a sharing, can we do that?
We can look at doing a variety of different things.
Yeah. I
but
mean,
the way the current legislation
I would like for that to be
is written.
considered if we can't do what we're requesting. Here's the meeting that you did tell us about, and I did send an email telling you that I wouldn't be able to attend because I had a conflict, because I would have been there myself. But if we're not able to do the sharing, and we can go back to the way it was before you had 2 towers taking over another district, could we just do that? That would be easy enough. And
If
then
you're
we can
saying-
look at redrawing the lines at a later point.
If you're saying going back to the way it currently exists under the current legislation, the current ordinance,
Yes.
that it's just the
current 7 districts, if we went that route.
then it would be the same existing companies named in the current ordinance? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but then the ones that have 2 would have to give up 1.
Well, I'm not sure what you're saying when you say they have 2. Do you mean 2 tow companies?
Yeah.
Yeah, what you're saying is, there's 2 companies that have 2 districts. But you got to understand, City Council did not give that to them. Those are companies that failed or went out of business or retired and said, okay, we want to sell our business. So a tow company said, we'll buy it. They inherited that tow district. So I think that's really waters that we got to be careful. Yeah.
But the authority of overseeing the districts rests with the council, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure.
So,
Well, don't forget, I have members that want to speak to, just to give you guys heads up, so in case you...
The statement, you know, we're trying to help, there's some intention to help some who haven't had the opportunity. But there's others that it sounds like they're here who feel like this is going to hurt them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and if you want to hear from them now, I'll do that, and then that
would be great.
Might, you know, see some of the answers or questions, so...
And they have already paid, they put money into this.
Right, that's a good question. They can speak to that. So what I'll do is, all fairness, is I know I want everybody to speak. So one of the tow companies is Kenny's Automotive, is the owner or a representative here from that tow company. You're more than welcome to speak for 3 minutes. No? Okay. Owner or representative from Team Towing, if you want to speak, you're more than welcome to speak for 3 minutes. And if you don't mind, just get sworn in by our law department, if that's okay. Can we do that, Mr. York?
Certainly.
And while you're at it, we have 2 other tow companies that would like to speak. Let's just swear them all in, please. Pardon?
Why don't we swear everybody in who might be testifying about their towing company? You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, nothing but the truth. Say, I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I believe your name is Carol. If you don't mind stating your name, your address for the record, and then if you don't mind, just take a few minutes, no more than 3 minutes, just to tell us a little bit about your business and why this is a good piece of legislation, I guess.
My name's Carol Coleman Crane. My place of business is 645 Carroll Street, Akron, 44304. It resides in Ward 4, or 5, I'm sorry. And I've had my business about 2.5 years, and I have approximately 6 flatbeds, 5 wheel lifts, medium duty service vehicle. We do approximately 1,200 to 1,600 tows for AAA per month, as well as a couple other motor clubs, some private sales, some garages here and there. So we definitely have the equipment, we definitely have the staff. We provide a successful service in Summit County and in the city of Akron. And I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't know I was going to be speaking, but I have made a huge investment in my business, and I have approximately 16 to 20 employees, and some of them have been very loyal. And you know, it's a tough business, and it requires a lot of work, and I would like to be a part of this, the city of Akron, and I'm not asking for a large group. I'm in Ward 5. We do police calls now. We get we did about 5 this past week. We get called when someone is in an accident, if they have AAA coverage, and they call, and we arrive. I have 2 vehicles in my lot from just over the weekend. So we're already providing the service successfully. I'm just trying to branch out, and I appreciate the meetings I've had with people. I appreciate the reception I've had with people, and I just ask that you consider me. You're welcome to come to my place of business and see our operation. We have everything of the requirements that I've been sent, the ordinance, and as I said, we do it. We're doing it. We've been doing police calls. We just aren't on your rotation.
Thank you, Carol.
Any
I
questions?
appreciate that. What I'll do is I'll call everybody up, and if we have any other questions or comments, we'll go from there. The first gentleman that sent me a letter requesting to speak was Greg from Greg's Towing. I do believe he brought some employees with him. Go ahead and state your name and your address.
My name is Greg Prunty, 1620 East Waterloo Road, Akron, Ohio, 44306. I am the owner of Greg's Towing and Bondurant's Towing.
Go ahead.
I've been in the towing business for approximately 50 years. I've been doing police towing for 29 years, and well before that through other companies. But we have plenty of staff. Our total employees probably average about 250 years experience. Most of the guys been doing it quite long. We have plenty of equipment. We respond in time. We do it in time. You know, the worst part about this deal is somebody's going to get their hours cut. Somebody's going to get laid off. All of our equipment's up to date, and I don't think we have a problem with the service that we give. We donate a lot of time. One of them is we do the marathon. We've done for 15 years. We've not charged a marathon in the first 7 years to move approximately 100 cars per year. No expense to the city, no expense to anybody. We've not had a complaint by moving those cars every year. They're picked up off a city street, parked on a side street. Numerous other things. And the major part is we take care of our districts, we respond. We don't have a problem, so I can't figure out what we did to get removed from the problem, but we purchased both of our districts. Both the districts we purchased, they were going out of business. Nobody wanted to buy them. They were in poor shape. We purchased both of them when we bought them. We paid for them. We've worked at it. We bought all kind of additional equipment to handle them. And it's, you know, it's just, I don't believe it's, you know, there's a need for another towing company because the population of Akron has declined over the years. And, you know, just because somebody purchased one doesn't mean somebody comes along and wants one for free that it works. I mean, it don't set well with me, but, you know, I haven't, you know, I don't know what else to do, but there's, you know, like I say, we'll be laying off people and cutting hours, and so our people are going to suffer because, you know, they want to do that. I wouldn't have two districts if other people would have bought the places. Both places we bought came with council's approval. Zones came with approval through ordinance. So that's not like we opened up and got it. But that's about all I have to say.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Before you sit down, I want to thank you for bringing two of your employees, I see. And then how many employees do you have total?
We have 11, and we have some seasonal workers that will be starting shortly.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it, Greg. Thank you. The next gentleman that sent me an email on Friday asked to speak was John from Johnny's Towing. And I'll go ahead and give you 3 minutes, John.
Hello, my name's John Turgo from Johnny's Towing, 1122 Schweitzer Avenue, Akron. First of all, I'd like to say I don't think it's fair to the towing companies that the city already has. It's not fair to the city or law enforcement. General towing, AAA towing, we also do AAA towing. I'm not putting it down. Law enforcement towing is a total different aspect of towing than just picking up someone's car that's broke down on the side of the road. Police department's call, it's a situation, could be a homicide, could be a fingerprint situation. The tow operator has to know how to handle that motor vehicle without causing any harm to their evidence. It has to be able to be secured in a proper facility so they can come at any time needed to do that. That's just part of the law enforcement. They're a target on the roadway just like we are. They want to be off that roadway as soon as possible. You don't want to arrive on a scene and say, sorry, sir, I've never seen this before, I can't do it. You better get out of that truck and make it happen. Get these men off the road, get our people off the road. I lost a man last year on the roadway from an inattentive driver. I never want to see that happen again. They don't want to get hurt out there. It's not fair to what you're trying to do to us. We're out here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year without fail. The phone's answered 24 hours a day without fail. Law enforcement towing is a whole different avenue than just general towing. We employ about 22 people at this time, hoping to grow more, but if this happens, like Greg said, we're going to probably have to lay some people off. I don't want to do that. I've never had to do that. I've been in business for 42 years. I don't want to see it happen today. That's really all I have to say.
And John, just one question for you before you sit down. I just want to refresh the memory of council members. You just purchased Johnny's
In
towing, and when was that?
April, sir.
April, and council approved that, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now I'll go back to questions. No, you can sit down, I appreciate
He
that.
has a question.
He'll direct his questions to me, unless you have a question for him, Mr. Kilby.
Okay, so you purchased Johnny's?
Correct.
Now, when you purchased Johnny's, did that include his equipment, his impounding yard?
Everything, sir.
And his business?
That's correct.
And to you, the district is the business?
Very
basically.
important, yes, it is.
Okay, so you purchased that?
Yes, sir.
Greg, would you come up here, please? Yeah, Greg, when did you purchase Bowers?
Not Bondurant's.
I mean, Bondurant's. I thought you purchased Bowers. No.
No, that was Bob Bishop had
Oh,
purchased
okay.
Wilson's.
Yeah, all right. When did you purchase them?
I know I got A1 in '89, and Bondurant's was probably roughly '86, somewhere back then.
So and you purchased the impounding lot, his equipment, and the business, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you both you gentlemen consider the district as part of the business that you purchased, correct?
That's about all it was.
Do you mind telling us how much you paid for that, for Bondurant's?
Bondurant's was roughly $260,000.
Okay. So, one last question. Like, Greg, you said you go back 50 years. There's 7 current districts. How many were there 50 years ago?
7.
Okay. Do you know how far back that goes?
I can remember back as far as '69.
Okay. So would you say there was more or less police towing then than now?
There was more back then.
Much more, or just?
Quite a bit more, because
Okay.
population was more.
All right, well, thank you very much. All right, are you Lieutenant, I forget, Lieutenant or Captain? Captain Shanae, sorry. Has there, in your opinion, is the police towing operation we have now being done okay? Is there any problem that you can see with the way things are done right now?
We haven't had any major problems. There are always some issues that arise that the Towing Review Board addresses, such as tows that are dispatched incorrectly, out-of-district tows. Sometimes there, just like with any operation, there have been complaints, and we look into them. But as far as getting to the point where there's been official hearings or removal of companies for poor service or behavior, that has not happened to my knowledge, and certainly during my involvement with it, of which I had some involvement back when I was a sergeant quite a few years ago and worked at the information desk. I was part of the Towing Review Board then as well.
Okay. So, in your opinion, is there any need for change?
I would never discount change just for the sake of saying it's better not to change, but I would certainly want to know that more options have been explored as to the way to make sure that things are done fairly and that it doesn't place an undue burden on the police department and safety communications employees for making sure that an equitable process is followed.
Okay. Well, I don't think anybody is against change, but I don't think anybody is in favor of change just for the sake of change either. My opinion, I don't go along with this legislation. I think these existing tow yards are doing an adequate job. There's no need for change, in my opinion. We've been doing it this way for years. And I go along with the old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Now, I would like to hear from the opponents of this legislation why we should do this, other than just give somebody else a opportunity. I mean, what is the purpose of this? Does anybody want to answer that?
I don't mind answering from my vantage point. I can go back to the day, even when we did the sale of Johnny's. I raised the same question here then that I raised today. So I don't know how we got to a point where people are guaranteed 30 years without providing access to the opportunities to other folks. That was the biggest question on the table. If things were left to say, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, I can't imagine where I'd be, really. The issue is, we've come to this body as a council and said, so how do we afford opportunities to other people? Now, I don't know what people are willing to say publicly, but it ain't been all kumbaya with this review board, according to folks who are part of the review board. But what we've been told is, hey, got a problem with it? Council, it's your authority, you deal with it. And so maybe this is not the best piece of legislation, and maybe it needs, I don't know, Captain Shanae said she just had an opportunity to look at it today. I'm sorry that happens to us all the time. Sorry it happened to you. But I do think that there's an opportunity for us, and I do think that we need to address why it is that people who are the same residents, live in the same city, who are running similar businesses don't have opportunities. And I don't know when it happened that people just get 30 years worth of continuous opportunities and other folks don't. And so that was the biggest question before us. Maybe this is not the right piece, but we do, I think, wanted to open up that conversation that needs to happen more than just a conversation, because this is not the first time we've had it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sims. I'll go to Mrs. Samples, and then Mr. Freeman, and then back over to Russ Nill.
All right,
and then I'll make some comments.
Thank you, Councilman Kamer. So I have a question for Captain Shanae or even Councilman Kamer. A question for me, echoing what my colleague said, but I have a couple other ones. Do any of these tow companies currently sit on the towing review board?
The representative for the towing companies is Mr. Donald Miller from Miller's Towing.
Okay. And I appreciate my colleague's questioning of the gentlemen who own the companies, but just because someone purchased a business, they didn't purchase these districts. These districts are set by this body. And so I think it's important for us to think about the fact that some people have been in these seats for 30 years, and this is a draft. I apologize for you just getting it this morning, but I would hope that we would take time so we can think about a few things: inclusion, fair and equitable distribution. Both these companies live and work in the city of Akron and are doing great business in this city. Consider redrawing the lines and adding 2 new districts. And then no one can say they're losing business. But if they're already out here doing the work, why not give them an opportunity? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samples. Mr. Freeman, and then Russ Nill.
This is kind of an aside from the legislation itself, but I would refer to what was just said about redrawing the lines. I was prior to 2013, I was on towing review board because I was public service. And the lines as they're drawn right now, I would caution that. And it was an education that I got when I was on the review board, is based on where a company's located, they might say, okay, if it's anything 77 that's southbound, you get it. If it's anything that's 77 northbound, you get it, because of not just proximity, but because of quick access due to entrance ramps, exit ramps, and whatnot. So when we look at the lines are not only defined by interstate, they're also defined by best entry to that point where a tow might take place. So I would just caution, I would probably throw some caution to redrawing the lines. I remember my time on review board, it was I'll say it now because some of the owners are no longer there. Sometimes it was just juvenile. everything that I've heard as of late, I've not been on the board, is that things are fairly calm right now. And I mean, some of the comments that I heard when I first went was, well, you called my wife this, or you said she was a, and I think now we have some, I believe, responsible owners. And Mr. Kamer, you kind of told me, said, meetings are not like they used to be. So, but I really would caution against the idea of redrawing the lines, because it's kind of a sticky wicket when you think about access and egress and whatnot. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Neal? And then I'll make some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to share from the standpoint of just being a small business owner. I can see this from both perspectives. I can see when you purchase a business, you base it on its past history and its revenue, and you project your future based on that. But also, when you're in the industry, you want opportunity to grow your business. It's obvious that these districts are a city asset, and that right there is the challenge, because as a city asset, they belong to the citizens of Akron. And unlike before I was on council, I would bid on. I see some people laughing and may not think that this is okay. 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 Well, you know what? That fits right into perspective of our session this morning, of perception. So excuse me. Okay. But the point I'm trying to make is this. And again, it's a word that we on council and administration collectively have to get an understanding of. Captain Shanae mentioned it, and it's this word equity. It is something as legislators that we have to learn how to legislate so that it impacts everyone equitably. And it doesn't mean just putting everybody in the same room and saying that there's equitable distribution. So this is what I want to share, Mr. Chairman. Based on some of the suggestions that were made, you know, the part of the scripture where it talks about the baby being brought before the king and asked, well, whose baby is it? And they couldn't make a decision, so the king said, you know what, just cut it in half. And of course, if you're familiar with scripture, you know how that story ended out. Those who are impacted by this greater, meaning those that are in the tow industry, need to get together to help us come up with a solution. Because as my colleague Ms. Sims mentioned, I would love to have a 30-year contract. But I can understand with Greg's Towing and those others who purchased a company and invested that money based off of the revenue that came through that district being a part of it. And it was at one of the latter meetings, I think one tow company said that district accounted for about 40% of their revenue. And nobody can afford to take that kind of hit. But again, going back to the same token, a small business that wants to be able to have opportunities, we have to find a way where they can have an opportunity. Now, if it comes to sharing, I don't know, you wouldn't want to go day to day or week to week. If it's quarter by quarter or biannual, or they know that they have the contract for so many years, but I think they would have to tell us that. They have to let us know what's equitable. I can tell you as a small business owner, when I did business with the city before I got on council, it was a little bit different because it was a bid process. You were able to see what everybody bid, and you just decided if you wanted to bid that price and you could win it. It wasn't like you were locked out. So I say that because this brings, as we look at other contracts that are within the city, I've had this about, we're talking about the small parks. We've talked about some of our major parks, like the soccer park, and other facilities within the city. So definitely the tow company has to be involved in this discussion. But again, if I bring it back to me as a small business owner, I would hate to have purchased a company and based my decision on them having that district and then have it yanked from me. But at the same token, as a small business owner, I would hate to be locked out and never have the opportunity to bid on one just because of an older practice. And as we move to a more equitable society, this is part of the challenge, is finding that balance. So, but for that to happen, as we learned this morning, it can't be done with just the 13. We need to have those who are directly impacted, all of them involved in the process as well. So that's the towers, that's the police force, and that's council. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. I know we heard from the two tow companies that this will affect. We had one of the two proposed tow companies show up today, and they spoke. To my colleagues, this legislation, I believe, is not good for the city of Akron, nor the tow businesses, or the safety forces and citizens who travel our city. Out of respect, I've been on the tow review board since 2013 as your public safety chairman, and hopefully you trust my knowledge on how we should be moving forward. A lot of you know I have a proven track record of bringing in good legislation over the years. Examples are parking in front yards, parking in side yards, the animal cruelty ordinance, vacant building registry, and having the Akron Police Department ticket vehicles on vacant lots. And then just recently, the tow increases for the tow companies that they have not had in over 10 years. And that's taken me about 2 years to work on. I'm asking you, please allow me to take the time to really bring in a good piece of legislation that benefits everybody, including the safety of the Akron Police Department and the citizens we represent. Let me work with the Akron Police Department and the tow companies to find a better solution, not just a draft. With me saying that, I'm asking my colleagues to join me in voting this piece of legislation down, and I will make the motion for an adverse report. Can I get a second? Everybody in favor of adverse report? Aye. Anybody opposed? Can we do a roll call, Mr. Clerk, for an adverse report?
Public Safety Committee, Kaner.
Aye.
Somerville. Swirsky. Sims.
No, wait.
Aye or?
Are you against the adverse report?
Okay, Mosley Chapel.
She's not on the committee.
I'm sorry.
Bob Hope.
Would you quit sitting up there? Bob Hoke, I'm sorry. Okay. That's it?
Well, okay, if you don't mind telling the vote real quick before I go on to the next piece.
You have 4 that agree with the adverse report and 1 for the draft.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to our next piece of legislation. Thank you, everybody. Is ordinance number 11, authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for needed repairs and improvements to kitchen facilities and 2 of the city's fire stations, and ordinance with the 2017 capital improvement plan and declare an emergency. And today we have Deputy Mayor of Public Safety Charlie Brown. He brought some of our best Akron firefighters with him. Very best.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Safety Committee, Chief O'Neill, Chief Kaut, and I'm not sure the last time was his name. Mike Casiopo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll speak on this real quick and let you guys know what this is. So this is the first year of a...
We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Mr. Neal, can you take your side part? Thank you.
Am I good now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Now we can.
All right. So this is the first year of a program that is to maintain, repair, and replace kitchens in some of our fire stations. You guys are all aware of the problems we have with the actual fire stations needing replacement. This program was to help upgrade our kitchens and some of the stations to get more of a useful life out of the stations that they're in. Myself, District Chief Kaut, and Mike Casiopo, who works for the Akron Housing Rehab Division, He's been instrumental in helping us get these quotes together, get this program together, and pick contractors to do this. The contractor's already been identified. The bids are in. They all fall within the $40,000 threshold that we were allotted from as part of our 2017 capital budget. And we would like to get this program moving forward as quickly as we can.
Thank you. With that, we'll take questions. No, everybody else is okay? Okay. Any questions, committee members, please? Mrs. Somerville, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, which stations are we repairing the kitchens in?
The first two for, as part of the 2017 monies will be Fire Station number 5 in Ellett and Fire Station number 6 on Hawkins Avenue.
Thank you, Mrs. Somerville. Any other questions, committee members? Any council members? Oh, Mr. Swirsky, you got a question?
No, just, I would assume that this also helps in recruiting new candidates to the fire department that we have. Really nice cooking facilities, or that?
I would agree with that, and I would also maybe point out that the kitchen is kind of the focal point of our stations whenever we have citizens inside, tours, meetings, yes. So it's an important area of the station.
Thank you, Mr. Good question. Any other questions? Anyone? What is the time on this?
Consent agenda is fine.
Consent, okay. We got a motion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Just make sure smoke alarms are installed in the kitchens, please. All right, with that, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
We're not even halfway done.
Park and Rec resolution. If not, I'll move right into public
Is your
utilities.
committee here?
For public utilities,
Parks and Rec are next at
yeah,
2:15, okay?
That's just a resolution, and right after that is public utilities, so.
Oh, okay. I mean, you just want to go into and wait till at the end of the night for that?
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't see Mr. Valley here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that's where it was going.
Although,
What's up next? So what are you going to do?
but you're on public utilities too, so public utilities. Park is just a resolution. Not just a resolution. For members of council, the Park and Rec only has a resolution that we will address in general session, so the next meeting up will be public utilities, which will start in 2 minutes.
us through the minutes.
Can't have everything.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call Public Utilities meeting to order. Present are Kilby, Swirsky, Hoke, and Freeman. We have one piece on the old agenda, which we will continue. We will probably end up filing that and have something to replace it by the end of the year, but just want to make note of that. We also have a new piece of legislation that has come in, and then we'll speak on a continuing discussion regarding the HEAP discount situation that we've been seeing if we could address. But before us right now, we have an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter, excuse me, let me back up. Sorry about that. If I can please get a motion to approve the minutes from the last Public Utilities meeting. Okay, been motion and second. There's no discussion. All in favor? All right. Thank you very much. Now, we have one piece of new legislation, and that is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract for the replacement of the water transmission main between State Route 43 at Ravenna Road in Kent, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Yes,
Mr. Moore?
Mr. Chairman, we are in the process of completing an emergency connection to Stowe, which council approved a while back. As part of that contract, we'd like to extend that contract a little bit to replace this water main, which is frequently breaking on us. And because the contractor's already mobilized, we feel like we can get a better price for it. And that's what this ordinance is about.
Any questions from members of committee? Any questions from members of council? If none, is consent?
Consent would be fine.
Okay. Motion for consent. Thank you.
Second.
The motion is second. There's no further discussion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. As I stated, we have one piece on the old agenda that we will continue to take time on, but you know, this committee has been meeting and regarding the requests from citizens that have come in asking for the HEAP discount. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, members from the water department came in and gave us insight on the debt that we carry in relation to our water bill and how that debt is allocated. I sent out an email stating that we would have a meeting to discuss the proposed solutions that could come about to assist people with the HEAP discount. At our last meeting, which took place on the 27th, or the 20th, no, on the 20th, had asked for the number of persons on HEAP total, those that own homes and those that rent. I'm guessing the administration hadn't had a chance to get us that information. I also requested, because it was published in the Beacon Journal, the figures that led to the $4 million that they said it would cost us to assist people, renters, with HEAP. Sent that email out 2 or 3 times. Also sent out an email leading up to before this meeting stating that we would have this meeting, and it CC'd everybody on that email. No one's here, so I'm going to have to share and requested that information so that we could come up with a solution on how to help people who qualify for HEAP that are renters have assistance with their water bill. So without getting the information that was requested, I'm going to have to go off of the information that I was able to glean. And this is what I would like to share with members of committee. In the paper, it stated that where it said it would cost us $4 million to assist people that qualify for HEAP. Presently, we have 620 people that are getting HEAP assistance, and in 2016, the total dollar amount was $124,000. A little bit more. That accounts to about $200 in assistance per resident. So let's say since half of our residents rent and half are homeowners, I think it would be safe to assume that we probably have a few more that qualify for HEAP that are renters. So let's say if we had 1,200 instead of the 620 that would qualify for HEAP. Based on the numbers that were in the paper, that would cost us an additional roughly $250,000 a year to assist people, renters that qualify for HEAP. So in total, with homeowners and renters, a year it would cost us about $375,000 a year to assist with that program. Now, the challenge is, that's a far cry from the $4 million. A far cry from the $4 million. Now, but still the question is, how do we fund that $375,000 a year, of which we're already funding so how do we fund that additional $250,000? This is what I would like to suggest. When they gave us the numbers of what we're writing off, if you remember, we're writing off close to 1.25 every year is what we're writing off. We're getting back roughly $800,000 after we turn it over to the county and the county does their collection. So there's a gap of about $325,000 a year that is continuing to be carried on the books. Now, we may get that in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. We don't know. This is how I think we can underwrite this cost. One, something that is hard to extract from these numbers is what does it cost us every time we have to go out and do a shut-off? What does it cost us every time we have to go out and do a turn-on? Then what does it cost us administratively just to carry the administrative cost on, sending out the billings, doing the numbers of work just on the delinquent debt? This is where I think we can find the dollars to assist residents for HEAP. The question has been, we give it to the discount to homeowners because they have an asset that the city can attach. If they don't pay, we take that asset. If we function like most other utility companies, where we put the utility in the user's name, that way if the user qualifies for HEAP, they would get the HEAP discount. But here, staying with our traditional policy, the property owner, the landlord, would be almost like if you co-sign for someone's loan, the landlord would ultimately be responsible for that water bill if that user defaults on that loan. If the user defaults on that loan, the water bill is recalculated at regular user rate, not at the HEAP discount, and then it is, just like it is now, it would be attached to the property. Now, how does that help us out? If you look at what we're carrying in delinquent debt, if there's an incentive for people who are on HEAP, one, they would be assisted, because to get the discount, you would have to be current, and you would have to keep up with your payments. Not having the numbers that are requested from the administration, looking at them being current and keeping their payments up, that increases the city's cash flow. That takes the extra runs to make shut-offs, turn-offs, to keep up with all that debt. That takes us off of our books. That's a cost to us in and of itself. So we increase our cash flow, we decrease our administrative costs. And then, again, if they default, we have the property that is secured. But again, not having the actual numbers, I can't tell you what the exact savings would be. But we would be able to assist with just a few changes in our policy. We'll be able to assist HEAP, those who are renters that qualify for HEAP. And like anything that you do in business, if it doesn't work, if it doesn't actually increase our cash flow and reduce our costs, then we would be able to just revert. We could do it on a trial basis. Oh, I know what else I want to say. I asked how many people use, you know, we have the Renters Assistance Program. I forget what it's called, but they can go down there and get their, we pay their bill. The Akron Cares Program, is that what it is? Okay, Akron Cares Program. I asked how many of those people that come down there, what's their, you know, what's the status of their income? Those people, to qualify for Akron Cares, I believe you have to already be one who meets the PIP or HEAP requirements. You have to meet PIP or HEAP requirements. So if we assist these people up front already, we may even reduce the drain on our Akron Cares program. Not to mention the many other programs that are running throughout the city. Now, I gave to members of council, and I gave to Mr. Moore, Lift Up program, an innovative city strategy reducing utility debt and financial insecurity for residents. This is where we create synergy between what we do. In Mr. Freeman's ward, they are starting the empowerment seminar. The city would partner, because if people are struggling paying their water bills, guess what? They are probably struggling in other areas as well. So what we could do, and if, I apologize, I only did one page. It's a little bit more in depth than that. The actual leaflet has the full information. I can get it to folks later, or you can look it up online. Is that the city connects people that are struggling with their water bills to a financial empowerment piece to help them and find out exactly if it's mismanagement or if they are struggling in other areas, and connects them with the other services. So I bring this to this committee because we'll be bringing in, this is more of a policy change. I don't know if it's a legislative change. It's more of a policy change that the administration would have to make. I'll defer to you, Mr. Moore, to direct us in that way. But folks, those of us that were on council when we made the decision, not made the decision, when we vote, yeah, we made the decision, we voted to increase the water rates because we understood we had to pay the bill. We didn't want to do it. Use this example before. When the mail comes in and it's sitting on your desk and you know it's a bill, just because you don't open it doesn't mean it's going to go away. So we knew we had to pay that bill. We also knew that based on median income, that meant half of our residents couldn't afford it. This isn't going to help everybody. But if you qualify for HEAP or PIP, that means that you are one of the more vulnerable members economically in our community. As stewards of the city, the citizens, this is one of the small ways we can help a small portion. I'm sure there's others who would like for us to be able to find a way to help them, but I believe if we do this, we can help without hurting ourselves. So, Mr. Moore, I'll get with you to see, you know, if there's something more that council has to do. But like I said, without the information, seeing where that $4 million came from, based on the information that I had, it's nowhere near $4 million. It's not even $1 million. It's under $500,000. But the question is, how many people would actually qualify for HEAP that are renters? And we're trying to get those numbers. So with that, I will ask if there's any questions from members of council or any comments. If not, yes, sir, Mr.
The
Freeman.
piece that you distributed to us,
Yes, sir.
we can find out more about this where?
Online, I looked for a PDF version. What I will do is I will ask Ms. Howley to please copy all 4 sides in color and get it to members of council and administration.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too would like to extend a discount to renters that qualify for HEAP, provided it doesn't raise rates for everybody else. Now,
Yes, sir.
We need to have some hard and fast numbers, not just somebody's assumption about how much it would cost the city. Now, I think probably, I don't know where the city came up with $4 million. I'd like to hear how they did that, maybe next week. But I guess what we need to know is, first off, is it public knowledge how many people are on HEAP? Can we find that information out? I don't know. We can look at statistics, what the poverty rate is, and we know probably half the people are renters, so we can probably estimate it, but I would like to have more than an estimate. If we could come up with some hard and fast numbers, how many renters there are that would qualify for HEAP, and then see what the discount would cost the city. So, but you know, the thing is, like, somebody in the water department needs to work on that for us and get them numbers. But that's all I want to say about the sewer bills. But if no one else has anything else about sewer, I'd like to, you know, talk about something else right now.
Just a second, Mr. Kilby, Ms. Moby, Councilman Moby would like to say something.
I too agree that if a person has a HEAP voucher, regardless of where you live, you should be able to use the voucher. And it's a one-time instrument that's used toward your bills a year. And we should be able to find those numbers. And hopefully, if I can get them, I have put in a request. But if you have a HEAP voucher, you should be able to use it. And so we have to figure out, how do we go about making that happen for people? Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? If not, Mr. Kilby.
Yeah, to change the subject to cable, Mr. York, can you answer a couple questions, please? I don't know if that's your expertise in the law department, but
Mr.
you
Kilby.
are from the law department. Did you want to say something about sewer?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, is this in relation to the legislation that came in earlier?
Do we have another piece of legislation?
Well, no, sir, I was going to say, because I know it seems like the cable should have been in public utilities, but I believe we do have a meeting at 3:30 in regards
Yeah, I would like to just ask a real quick question. First off, I've been getting calls about Spectrum, used to be Warner Cable, goes back, what, probably to the 60s, I understand, and the city granted Warner Cable an exclusive franchise. My understanding is we don't have any regulation at all over cable companies at all. Is that correct, Mr. York?
I don't know, Mr. Kilby. I've never worked on anything involving cable.
Well, I
It's a
get
law
Warner
department.
Cable or Spectrum now, and we're still, there's something on there, it says franchise fee, which is, if we don't have any franchise, it's just basically a tax, I guess, but we call it a franchise fee. I really do think, you know, we need to look into this a little bit. I think Councilman Fusco suggested maybe public utilities would do that. I'm interested in this to get some answers. I think Spectrum, yeah, there is Jeff. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, first let me apologize. Mr. Kilby, I apologize. When you were getting ready to speak, I got cable and cell towers mixed up. I was getting ready to say we had a, yeah, so I apologize. Yes, Mr. Fusco.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We had it scheduled for last week, actually, and had to cancel. So, and I think we mentioned that. So we're going to try to get it maybe next week if we can, schedule a time or early next year in terms of bringing in the, and I made a phone call into the Warner Cable representative here locally. Spectrum, right. Thanks.
Thanks for bringing that point up, Mr. Kilby. And thanks, Mr. Fusco, for clarification.
One last thing, the person that is in the law department that's our resident expert on cable or communications? Can that person come, whoever they are, one that would handle this subject? I don't know who that is. It used to be somebody that I think he retired.
Okay. You requested for someone...
Mr. Montaigne's gone, right? Yeah. Okay, he used to handle those for us. Okay. Dave Montagne.
Yes, whoever can assist us in that area, that'd be helpful too. Okay. Mr. Moore, did you have something?
I was just going to say, I'd make a request to the law director and see if there's someone there that can handle those questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moore. Members of committee, if there aren't any more questions on any of the matters discussed, ask for a motion for us to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
I mean, you have it now 3:30. Let's meet.
Budget and Finance will be meeting in about 30 seconds.
No. Look at the schedule.
Yep.
Economic Development will be meeting right now. No, actually, Health and Social Service. We're about 4 committees behind. Okay?
Yeah, special meeting tonight.
Parks already met. Public Utilities, Health and Social Services is next.
Clerk, we're next.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Health and Social Services, please.
Yeah, but he just... Oh, okay. Well, he said wait, so I'm not going to worry about it. You can't take preference over. Why are we working in such a hurry?
All the members of the Health and Social Services Committee present, please.
You could do it. I'm not going to do it. These guys, Mike Freeman just tried to start budget.
We have one resolution in the Health and Social Services Committee, a resolution opposing a tax bill recently passed by the United States Senate, urging the President to veto any such legislation that comes before him, urging the President to shield Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security from any cuts and declaring an emergency. This piece of legislation is sponsored by Councilwoman Mosley Samples.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This resolution is opposing the procedural vote that has taken place for the President to sign the new tax plan, which of course would affect Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, as well as a lot of other programs, but those three will definitely be hit greatly. There are currently 3 representatives who are now on the fence as to whether they're going to continue to support the bill. So hopefully this resolution being sent to D.C. will help offset this being signed into legislation. So I would hope that you all would be supportive of this and that it will affect, in my understanding, 83 million people greatly.
Are there any comments or questions from the members of the committee? I am certainly in favor of this legislation. I don't know whether we have a president that's going to hear us, but I think it doesn't hurt to send it to his attention. And I don't know what the bill that's coming out of conference is going to look like. I can't imagine looking any better than the one they took to the Senate. But if there are no questions, no comments, I would like to move that we do council as a whole, if that's okay with the councilwoman. We'll do
You
it
might want
tonight.
to make that recommendation this
Tonight?
evening. Right.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to move this piece of legislation? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Let me go back and ask for a motion to pass the previous minutes of the last meeting we had.
Motion to approve minutes from the last meeting?
Any questions, comments?
Meeting with Health and Human Services, Social Services.
All in favor of accepting the minutes? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? And all members of the committee are present as well. Hearing no further comments or no other issues to come before the committee, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
No, I'll tell you when you're coming up. You just sit there and be patient, son. Economic development. Or you're going to get a detention if you keep doing that. Where is our economic development team? That's good.
That's even better.
Whenever you're ready, Madam Chair.
Okay, we're going to call Economic Development Committee meeting to order. All committee members are present. Can we get a motion to approve the minutes from our previously held meeting?
Motion to approve.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We have one piece before us. Ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a grant agreement with Rogers Industrial Products Incorporated and declaring an emergency.
Good afternoon. This has come about for two reasons primarily. We were doing some changes into the BFG power plant, closing it down basically. That caused us to have to resupply power to Rogers Manufacturing. Rogers Manufacturing at the same time launching a new product line required more pressure than what we typically could provide. So after negotiations, we decided the best for the city and them was to help provide some money towards their boiler, new boiler, that could provide the pressure that they needed. And that's what this grant would be going for.
Okay, very good. Do we have any questions from committee members? Any questions from any other council members? All right, if we have no questions, is consent agenda okay?
Yes, thank you.
Motion for consent.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. If there's nothing else coming before the committee, we'll adjourn.
Mr. Freeman, you're up.
I'd like to call the Budget Finance Committee meeting to order. I have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting. There's a second. All in favor of accepting the minutes, please let it be known by saying aye. Mr. Clerk, I'm having trouble with we have one old piece here. And this had to do with annual appropriation. Trust, did you receive any questions from the body throughout the week?
I did not.
Okay. And any other questions? We had looked at this piece on appropriations last week. Any questions from the committee or from any other council members? think we would like to move ahead with this.
Correct.
Okay. You want should we suspend the rules or consent agenda? Tell me.
Suspend, we just need to get it done.
Okay, very good. So if there are no questions, I'm looking for a motion to suspend the rules. So moved. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All right, we will pass that out this evening. All right, we have one new item. This is an ordinance amending, supplementing Title 9 General Provisions, Chapter 104 Income Tax Ordinance, Section 104.03, Purposes of Tax Rate in order to update the codified ordinances of the City of Akron to reflect the additional 0.25% income tax levy pursuant to Section 86E of the Charter of the City of Akron as approved by the voters on November 7th, 2017, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, Issue 4 did pass on November 7th. This ordinance will allow us to begin the levy of the increased 0.25% tax on January 1st, 2018.
Okay,
so
very
our
good.
new rate will be 2.5%.
Okay. Questions or comments? Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just reading it real quick. It looked like in the legislation that my understanding, I thought it was for capital improvements, but it looked like in the legislation it could be used for operating as well as capital improvements.
It can be used for operating for safety forces.
Oh, just for safety?
Just for safety forces.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just one comment I'd have. I trust that in both the capital and the operating budget, will you somehow be able to identify, because that's a thick budget, will you be able to identify these new funds when we look at those budgets?
Correct. We will separate these similar to the way that we do with the Community Learning Center 0.25% tax. The issue 4s will be accounted for separately.
Excellent.
Add to what Steve said there. As the mayor promised, we're going to be putting out that report every year about how the Issue 4 funds are spent. We felt that this year, since obviously the voters just approved it, we wanted to put out a report as we put it in the budget, just so people could see what our plan was for 2018. So not only will that be split out for you, but we will have something that will be distributed citywide, just to let people know this is where, you know, those Issue 4 funds are specifically going to go towards police, fire, and roads, split out that way.
Fantastic. Thank you. So any other questions or comments? So motion to suspend the rules. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Any opposed? All right, we will pass that out this evening, and if there's no further business to come before us, we will adjourn. Thank you.
And in about 2 minutes, we will have our special meeting. So if you want to take a quick break there, we'll come back for our special meeting.
What is? Check with Marilyn. She's on that. Oh, okay.
right, we're going to call the meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. And probably be easier, for the record, who do we not have? So we have, for the record, we have Councilman Fusco, Councilman Hoke, Councilman Milkovich, Councilman Kamer, Councilman Swirsky, Councilwoman Somerville, Councilwoman Sims, Councilman Kilby, Councilman Neal, and Councilwoman Mosley Samples, and did I call Linda's name? Oh, Councilwoman Amobian. So, and maybe we have everyone, I don't know, but we last week visited this item on the lease for our telecommunications, and I am going to turn this over to Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council and committee. We had a very, very good and thoughtful discussion last week about this particular piece of legislation. Throughout the week, both the law department taking the lead and others answered many questions, hopefully satisfactory. And so tonight, or this afternoon, we're asking Committee of the Whole to consider suspension of the rules and passage this evening in order to effect the transaction by the end of the calendar year for the reasons we laid out last week. Still here, as you can see, Director Diane Miller-Dawson is here, as well as Brian Angeloni. We can answer questions as well right here if council has any.
All right, we'll open up to any questions from any of the council members to be directed to our parties behind us here or to Mr. Hardy. We would give you opportunity at this time. Yes, Ms. Sims?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I understand the piece far better than I did last week, but I'm still a little queasy about 50 years. But in response to the inquiry about best practices, I know we got some information about what an attorney said. I was actually looking specifically, I thought we would get a city or a municipality who has done this that we could have been able to see. But outside of that, I guess that was my, I didn't expect. I appreciate the Attorney Angelini's response, but I thought there were specifics we were bringing back relative to a municipality.
Sure. I can let Brian speak to that as well. I can tell you, again, as we spoke last week, countless numbers of municipalities across the country have enacted similar transactions. We went with the response we did in part, and I'll let Brian speak for himself, because our attorney, that is the city's outside counsel on this, representing us, has done so many of these that we thought his expertise would be the best foot forward on this. We certainly could try and seek actual agreements. Those are not always easy to get in a quick fashion, but we can certainly still try and get those if you're interested. But we hope that we've answered the 50-year question sufficiently, but I invite Brian up to make any other comments.
Thank you. Councilwoman, I think that the short answer to that is, in terms of specifics for cities, I did reach out to our council to talk to him. Really, it boils down to we would likely have to do public records requests with respect to those jurisdictions in order to do that. And I think with the time constraint of what we're looking at the year end, we could certainly look to provide council with that. But really the answer to the question, again, is that there is a range of options. But really, the standard practices, as it appears to be, are anywhere from 50 years in perpetuity. So almost really what is tantamount to a sale of the actual real estate. Here we went the opposite way. We went to the lower end of the spectrum, which was the 50-year, which we thought was still long enough where we would get the maximum value for the assets, while at the same time retaining a reasonable time period to get the leases back eventually. So that's really the short answer. And as Mr. Hardy pointed out, it really was upon the advice of counsel, who's an expert in that field. So that's pretty much as I can tell you.
The only thing I would add to that too, if it pleases the group, is that I think we also were mindful of what the asset was we were trying to monetize. So we retained ownership of our land. That is not always the case, as Mr. Angeloni just pointed out. We also retained our ability to, if we so choose, to continue to look at other city-owned land if we wanted to do other telecommunication activities with third-party providers. So we think we've struck, again, as we talked about last week, a pretty balanced approach in regards to the City of Akron's case. But as Mr. Angeloni said, there was a wide range of the way that cities have gone after this.
Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don't know where to start. I understand everything that we're doing. It did open up more questions for me. I, like my colleagues, and probably even like you guys, 50 years. I mean, that's a long time. A lot could happen. And so a couple things ran through my mind. One, just about the general process with this. I'd like for us to be able to one time talk about how this process worked. Because I understand we've already kind of like, did we budget the $6 million or have we spent the $6 million?
Thank you. It was a part of our 2017 budget.
Okay, but we didn't, it's in the budget, but we didn't spend it, or?
But technically, our plan is to spend that money. So if we have not spent it today, our plan is to spend the money.
Okay, so we can have some conversation about that. And when it made me just think of our total assets of the city. So in directly related to this was one of the things that came to mind. And Mr. Hardy, I'm glad that you said we maintained our property rights, mineral rights, because I called somebody that was not a title deed person. I said, well, when you own a piece of property, what do you own? They said you own it to the core of the earth, to the height of the heavens, technically. So do we keep our air rights for that area as well, or?
Yeah, the leases actually call out very specific spaces on which they can actually place the equipment and things like that. There are certain height restrictions and things like that in play with the standalone towers as well.
Okay, thank you. And the reason why I asked, which leads me to my next one, and I know we get something like $400,000 a year right now from the leases, correct?
Yeah, we get roughly, I think we said approximately $500,000. There's two sources of revenue, one being sort of the baseline contractual lease agreement, which you can count on year after year after year. That's what you agree to. Then, depending on technology, oftentimes there might be what are called co-location fees, which you can never count on. They sometimes come, they sometimes go, based upon, again, the third party's willingness to put different things on the pole itself. So we approximate $500,000 a year.
Okay, thank you, because this leads me to my last part. When we talk about community benefit, and I know we had asked the company about that, as we ask every company, what's the community benefit? But I thought, what about us as far as a city? What is the community benefit that we could establish? And it could be even in partnering with someone that has the intellectual capital of knowing how to leverage this type of thing, because $500,000 on $10 million investment is just a 5% return. When you've got $10 million, you better bet they're looking for better than a 5% return if it's invested. So this is where I'm coming from with this. We know if we take that $5 million, and if that's in our reserves, we're not planning to spend that anyways. We're just saying, hey, we've got this money, and it's in the bank. It's our rainy day fund. We don't plan on having to touch it. Now that I don't know where our present $5 million is invested, and I don't know what our present return on that is. I would like for us to get an understanding. Now, as a government, once those dollars come into us, we may be restricted on how we can invest them. So this is the point on what I want to make. Since we don't have them yet, can we look at having an intimate relationship with an entity, changing this thing? If they know how to do better than a 2% bond return with this asset, where we take those other dollars, let them invest them in such a way where we continue to get our $500,000 a year. Because again, on 5 million, now you're just talking about a 10% return. I know that's harder to glean, but when you're talking that kind of money, it's like anything. When you go to the bank and you only have $100 to put in there, you're lucky if they don't give toasters anymore. But you know, the more you have, the more the bank opens up, or the more investment opportunities open up to you, and the more is made available. Certain things are restricted from the average person because the average person doesn't have the acumen to be able to make those type of investments. But if we're talking about, you know, this type of dollars, I'm saying before it comes into us, can we look at restructuring this deal to where we're getting a greater return? Because I'd rather get $500,000 for money that's going to be in our reserves anyways for 50 years and turn that into $25 million.
We are limited on what we can invest in.
No, I know we are, but they're not. If we structure the deal with the company in such a way, again, it's all in how you write the deal. We just change the deal, and we get more back. That's what I'm saying. I know when it comes to us, we're restricted.
Right, very restricted.
I know we are. But we're making a deal with, so if we entrust them to have, to be a partner with us on that asset, as we move, now we've talked about this, we're moving to a smart government. Smart cars, pretty soon cars will be driving up to our front yards and nobody will be in them. Well, the cell towers, I think, are going to play some kind of a role in that. That kind of technology is going to play some kind of role. So if we're going to be that intimately joined at the hip, let's look at how we can leverage this asset in a greater way. Because once it comes into us, you're right, we're restricted.
But again, we have a deal on the table. I don't know if we want to go back and restructure it. The other thing I was going to say is the city typically keeps the money short because we don't know when we're going to need it. Or we're not planning on using it immediately. It needs to be kept short.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is this. Presently, we have an agreement where we know we get $400,000 to $500,000 a year. $400,000 to $500,000 a year. We have an opportunity to do something that's unique and leverage this asset to get even more back. And we don't, you know, and this is something we have to look at every asset that we have. It's not here yet. It's a deal. Any deal can be negotiated as long as they know that the deal is going to be made. It's a matter of any relationship is only as good as the two people who are involved in that relationship. What I'm saying is we have an opportunity to take $11 million and turn it into a lot more. But once that money comes into the city, we're hit. We are restricted to what we could do with it. So that's just, I mean...
I need to interrupt for one moment because I have to turn the chair over to Ms. Somerville.
Okay, thank you. And so thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll stop. I mean, I look at this. You only get these kind of opportunities once in a lifetime to make these type of deals. And I agree with what we're doing, but we only had and that's why I asked if we can have these discussions in the future much longer, because we've only had a week to think about this thing, and I'm not able to get all the information back that I'm trying to get back. But just knowing, if you've ever been blessed to have, well, all of us are hopefully get a tax return back, you want to make the best that you can with that, because you know you got to wait hopefully another year to get something back. This right here is even greater than that. So that is my concern. For me, that is a way for us to leverage that 50 years, having a relationship with a company.
Yeah. So let me respond to that. I've jotted down a few different things. So the first is, and I think we had a really good discussion together last week about what other opportunities might there be to appropriately monetize city assets as a revenue stream for the city. And I agree, and I think we agree that this is really, again, chapter and verse from the Blue Ribbon Task Force. This is our first real attempt at doing some of these things. We could and should have conversations about other opportunities, and we can do so. We also talked last week about this concept of community benefit, and I don't disagree that community benefit needs to be top of mind when we're talking about how we not just in technology, but really in anything that the city's doing. But let's just take technology, for example, because this is what we're talking about today. I don't think this transaction is going to yield us the community benefit that you're thinking about. But there are other things that are coming, as we talked about last week. In fact, I just got emailed today that the Senate Finance Committee is moving a bill, again, seeking to augment our rights and our ability to regulate our right-of-way in 5G as that gets rolled out and developed and installed. Those conversations are happening. We're very involved in those. But if and when that day comes, and it's coming, where the telecommunication companies, not necessarily us, but the market forces that will come to bear are going to come to Akron, and they're going to want to do things in our city to build out the technology infrastructure they need to make their devices work. That is the moment at which we need to be ready, and we need to be focused on what we can get as far as community benefit. I don't think this particular transaction, where we're talking about a finite number of leases that, yes, provide revenue, but are of no guarantee that they ever continue past anyone's technology as it changes, which is radically all the time. There's no guarantee on those. This isn't that transaction to really have that conversation in my mind, but I do think it's a conversation that we need to have on the larger telecommunications front. And the last thing I'll point out, and Diane can speak to this better than I can, and actually Ellen mentioned something to me just now, which is a legal thing, which I won't even dare to touch because I'm not an attorney, but she could speak to it. We need the funds. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we talked about this last week. We budgeted in our miscellaneous revenue, not extra money, money needed to pay the bills of the city in this fiscal year. And we've effectuated that. That's why this transaction is important. We got that done. The benefit, you talk about a community benefit, was that, and really again, which is why I was so proud of our team last week, and I'm still proud of it, by going through a thoughtful process, by not just signing on the dotted line, by having a tough negotiation, we were able to get more than we anticipated. And so we're able to double our cash reserves. That is a necessity. And I'll turn it over to Diane to talk about why that is so important. So it's not about, I feel very confident, we all feel very confident in the quality of the deal that's before you. I do think we need to have longer conversations, not only about assets, but about this larger looming telecommunications infrastructure build out and what we get for it. But at the end of the day, we had always planned on doing this, and because of the thoughtful process that our team took, we were able to get more for the citizens than we thought we would, and double our cash reserves, getting us further down the line to that GFOA recommendation. I don't know, Diana, if you want to.
I was going to say exactly that. Again, this stabilizes our bond rating. That's very, very important. I mean, it doesn't upgrade us to any certain extent, but it keeps us where we are. It doubles our cash reserves. That's very important. It'll help us if there's a rainy day. It'll help us. We'll have some money that we can actually tap to help us pay our bills.
And then I'll ask Madam Chair, Ellen just had a moment.
Sure.
I just wanted to respond to Councilman Neal's suggestion. I think I understand what you're proposing as far as not having the funds come into the city's exact possession, but having it be invested by this third party. Legally, it doesn't matter whether the funds touch our general fund or not. If we have control over them and they're public dollars, we can't invest them with a private company in that way. Actually, the Ohio Constitution prohibits that because there's obviously risks involved, which goes back to, you know, the strictures. It's an interesting idea, but actually it doesn't legally make any difference. We wouldn't be allowed to do that, although it was very creative. So something to be talking about and thinking about and trying to be as creative as we can, but that exact issue has come up before, and there are prohibitions in the Constitution regarding our investing funds in that way. So.
Thank you so much. Do you want to resume your position as chair? I see you're back in your seat at this moment. I will relinquish it over to you. And you have a couple questions on the floor, Councilman Neal and
Mr. Neal, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And trust me, I understand a little bit. I understand once they hit our hands, we're restricted. But that goes back in how you write up the deal. I'll speak on the level of understanding that I have. you know, you may sign an agreement for someone to purchase a home. You put $5,000 down, and then at the end of the year, you're going to give me another, end of so many years, you're going to give me another, whatever it could be. I could say 50,000. The agreement could be signed and agreed, but we would restructure the end. You give us the 6 that we need right now, and then we can do the numbers and figure it out. I mean, these guys work with hedge fund folks. I mean, they could do the thing, $5 million, 50 years out at a minimum return, and then you don't base it on that. We're going to give you $6 million now, and then we'll give you payments of $400,000 or $500,000 a year for each year, and then give you a balloon payment at the end of that. I'm saying you just write the deal that way. It's how you write the deal. It's not tying up the city's assets in any other kind of way. And I know it may be too late to do it now. This is my thing is just 50 years is a long time. For us to bring the money into our coffers and its reserves, we're not going to touch it anyways. So we're talking about that $5 million difference, not the $6 million, the $5 million difference.
Certainly.
And it may, if it's too late, it's too late, but it's definitely something, let me tell you, in the future, and I don't say this that often, but I think that's the thing that, God forgive me, that's the thing that excited folks about our president. The fact that he would look at it from a business standpoint and not just a government standpoint. You know, he speaks about the art of making the deal. You know, that's right. I know. So, trust me, I applaud what's being done and the money that's coming in. But like I said, if we could have had this group discussion more, I think we could have found out how not taking any more from these gentlemen, because they gave us the best deal, but just asking them to do what they do to help us maximize what we can get, and it all still being the same money. So, thank you.
No, I appreciate those comments, and again, one of the things that it reminded me of something that Mr. Angeloni said last week, which is we don't know where technology is going to go, but if and when our city-owned land becomes valuable, I think it doesn't preclude us, even if technology doesn't change, of creating a new crop of not saying we would do this, but there's nothing to stop us from creating a new crop of assets that could then be monetized and done differently. I think we went down a very thoughtful path. I want the citizens and everyone to know that this was done with a great deal of thought and outside expertise. We feel it's a very good deal for the citizens and for the city, which is why, again, I'm still so thrilled and proud about it. I think you bring up some very interesting and good ideas. I don't think this is, I do think it's too late to do it here. I also don't know if this is the right transaction, but I think we had, based upon the discussion last week and the discussion now, I think we're thinking about it, in my own opinion, thinking about it in the right ways. We just need to continue the conversation as this thing evolves.
Thank you. Ms. Posey Samples?
Thank you. Just one question. First, thank you for getting back to me on my question that I sent over to you so quickly. One other question I have is, in 50 years, many of you all will not be here. I plan on being here.
I'm planning on being here. I plan on being here.
Will they be able to?
Maybe not here. Maybe not at this podium, but yeah.
Probably not down here, right? Will they be able to sublease out? So say we lease all these to them and say come 15 years down the road, they're like, this is not what we thought it would be. Is there a clause that has, where they have to come back to us, or they're allowed to sublease out?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that for me just one more time, make sure I'm clear?
So subleasing.
Okay.
Is there a clause in there where they're able to sublease? So say there's this lease and it goes on 15 years down the road and they feel like this is not a good fit for their company.
Yes.
Do they have to come back to us to say this is not a good fit for us, to see if we want to resume responsibility again, or can they go out and sublease to a third party?
Yeah, so really there's a couple things in play there. First of all, there is no, we typically refer to it as a right of first refusal, where if you're going to sell it, we have to go to you first and make you the same offer that we're getting from somebody else. There is no right of first refusal in there. So they would have the right to go ahead and transfer their rights under that 50-year agreement. There are certain consent and notice provisions in there. So there is a notification clause where they would have to let us know that that's what's happening. In addition to that, whoever they would transfer it to, there are certain restrictions on who that party could be. They have to be a certain reputable type of company and things like that. There are also some restrictions in the sense that they have to transfer all of the responsibilities and rights to that party. So it's the whole ball of wax goes with the next buyer too. So it's not like they could pieces, parts, things, and somehow change the deal for somebody else. It's kind of the whole thing would be transferred to a new party. They would have the exact same responsibilities, and they would be subject to the same restrictions.
Ms. Sims?
So well, I'm not really sorry. As much as I am, I wish we were earlier on in the conversation, and I probably would have not so many questions. I'm surprised as we think about the digital divide in our city that we weren't thinking about this even in this deal. I know it doesn't seem like a direct connection, but certainly it seems like we should have been able to derive some benefit to try and address that. But I guess my long-term concern is I just can't imagine someone come pay $11 million and not see the future of the sites that we have. I know we can broker some deals with the remaining sites that we have that are on public property, but these are prime sites in the city, and I think that's of course why we have people, we're only looking at 15 and not the whole gamut. So again, I do really appreciate all of the information that we've gotten. I do think there was some due diligence done in this matter, but again, it's unfortunate that we don't see other plans, so we could see even if there were some kind of deals able to be brokered, not maybe exactly like Councilman Neal talked about, but maybe something like that where we could have done something a little different, that we could have derived greater benefit from the sale or the 50-year lease, since it has to be 50 years.
So I guess I respectfully take issue with that we didn't think about the digital divide. I personally think about it every day. This whole smart city thing is something that's in my portfolio, and I feel very deeply about it. This is not where the rubber meets the road for the digital divide. This is the sale of leases on cell towers and cellular technology that's on our land. There's a market for it, which is why we went towards it. We were trying, and we will continue to try and find creative ways to increase our financial capabilities without having to go always to the rates and the fees and everything else. This is one of those, but I strongly take issue with that we didn't think about the digital divide. We think about it every day. This isn't the deal that's going to get to where we want to go on that. This is a very straightforward, market-driven transaction. There are industry standards for the 50 years. We hired outside counsel. We didn't do some due diligence. We did a lot of due diligence to get to this moment, a lot of it. We had outside expertise come in that have done dozens and dozens of these transactions on behalf of cities, not on behalf of the industry, representing cities, to make sure that we had industry standards in place. That doesn't preclude creativity, but I want people to have confidence, both in this chamber and outside of it, that this is a good deal, because it is. We went through a very thoughtful process. I don't disagree that we can have conversations with council about other appropriate assets for monetization. But there is a tremendous community benefit in being financially stable, a tremendous community benefit. And citizens, quite frankly, are expecting us to get ourselves into a better financial position. It's not acceptable to have your rating in the balance. It's not. We need to be stabilizing it, as Director Dawson said, and growing it, improving it over time. It's not acceptable to not be able to know that you can't weather the next recession. You need to be able to move on that. This transaction not only meets the current budget year, but also allows us to improve our financial stability. That is an enormous community benefit, and one that we worked really hard to get to. And that's my response.
First and foremost, Mr. Hardy, I'm sorry, you took that as a personal affront. The digital divide is a concern. I did get this last week. I just offer that, and everything that we talk about is related to technology. I hope we're thinking about the digital divide. Whether you take that as a personal affront, I'm sorry that you do. That's something I'm very passionate about also. And again, we got this last week, and so I'm telling you what I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't part of those conversations. I don't know if they happened or not. But I think it's my responsibility to remind us, if we haven't, that we do need to be thinking about those things. So I do appreciate the work you've done, but again, I got this last week. I've had some questions come up, and that is one that has come up, and so I offer that up as something that we do consider.
It's something we're thinking about every single day.
Mr. Mobian.
I just want you to know that between last week and this week, I have done some research as much as I could on this, so I'm feeling more comfortable with this. How many more of these do we have? Do we have more cellular towers?
As far as I'm aware, there is one other active site that we currently would receive revenue from. That was not included in the sale. As far as other potential sites, however, I'm sure that there are others, although I can't tell you exactly where they're at or what they would be. And again, hopefully, a relationship is created in this transaction as well. Perhaps we get some guidance on potential other sites as well in the future.
Thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Yes, sir, just one last thing. Seeing that this deal is pretty much consummated, what I would like to do is make sure that we have in-depth discussion about, so we understand the $6 million and how and what it's going to pay and cover. And then I would, just for my own edification, I don't know if others are interested, I would like to know what are our options to maximize as a city, our investments. What ways can we be creative with now our $10 million so that, if we can increase that, again, when I say from a community benefit side, because once we spend the 6, it's gone. So now we're going to have that gap of the 400, and I know in a $1 billion budget, 400,000 isn't that much, but now we're going to have that gap of that 400,000. And I can guarantee you, it sure would be nice to have that 400,000 and be able to break it amongst 10 wards and be able to do some things with $40,000. So that's where my thinking is. At some time, if we can have I know we're going into budget, but if we can have a true understanding, just looking at that 6 and what expenses that's taken off, hopefully that's writing off things that will never come back again, and then we can see how we can maximize that investment of the extra 5 or the extra 10 so that we can maybe get some return on that investment for neighborhood investment. Thanks.
Certainly.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Hardy, I think you guys did a pretty job, looked after the benefits of the people. My only request is, or complaint, I guess, is I don't know, I didn't know about anything about this till a week ago. I don't know if anybody that's here did. I would like to, you to, if you're doing anything else, let us know a little earlier, if you can. Then, I kind of think if anybody else has any more concerns, we have one more council meeting here this year, and I don't personally think we need to hold it up, but if anybody here does, I'll support that. Take a week, another week. Would it be any problem if we didn't pass it tonight and pass it next week?
It would.
It would?
It would.
Why?
Well, it's really a timing in terms of being able to actually go to closing on the financial piece of this. We obviously need council approval for that. Councilman, I don't disagree on the issue of having a broader conversation around appropriately monetizing city assets. I think that's one thing that certainly I have taken away from our conversations last week and this week. I totally agree. We don't have any others in the pipeline necessarily outside of, again, I've talked to you last week about the Blue Ribbon Task Force had contemplated looking at conservation easements, but we have not necessarily gone down that path just yet. But anything that we're thinking, I agree that we should have conversation ahead of time. But again, I would stress to the urgency of the timing of this to council. Again, you should have faith in the fact that this was thoroughly negotiated and vetted. This was not come at willy-nilly. We thought about this the whole way through. But your point is well taken, Councilman, that a broader conversation is needed as we go through these projects, and again, we're happy to have that.
Okay, thanks.
So would someone like to offer a motion that we suspend the rules? Is that what we're asking for? Okay, Ms. Amobian has a motion that we suspend the rules.
Second.
And there is a second. Okay, the committee, all in favor of suspending the rules, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Thank you so much. And just a word from a ward meeting that I had this week. Somebody told me to pass it along to the mayor. Said, tell him thanks for not spending it all. So it is going to be nice to have some cushion there, and I think there's been some valuable conversation here today. So we'll pass that out this evening, and if there's nothing else to come before us.
Wait, you got to have a roll call on this.
Oh, okay, feel free.
Okay. Freeman.
Aye.
Plasko. Hoke. Kamer. Key. Kilby. Milkovich. Mosley Samples. Where'd you go? Neal? Amobian? Simmons? Somerville?
Aye.
Swearstein? Okay, there's a motion and she will not be voting, is that correct? Yes? No? Aye? Don't leave the room when there's a vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.